The Brave New Worlds. In the early 15th century, the world was still largely unexplored. Many believed that the world was flat, with the edges of the map simply falling off into an endless abyss. But there was one man who dared to challenge this belief, a man named Lorenzo. Lorenzo was a sailor, a man who had spent his entire life at sea. He had seen things that many could not even imagine, and he had come to a startling realization. The world was not flat, but instead it was round, like a globe. At first, Lorenzo was hesitant to share his discovery with the world. He knew that many people would not believe him, and some might even try to harm him. But eventually, he could not keep his discovery to himself any longer. He gathered a group of his fellow sailors together to explain his theory. They listened intently, but many of them were skeptical. One man, named Marco, laughed and said, "If the world is round, then why don't we fall off the bottom?" Lorenzo tried to explain, using his knowledge of the stars and the way the horizon curved, but it was clear that many of his fellow sailors did not believe him. They thought he was crazy, and they laughed at him behind his back. But Lorenzo was not deterred. He continued to study and explore, trying to gather more evidence to support his theory. He even went on a voyage to the farthest reaches of the ocean, hoping to find proof of his discovery. When Lorenzo returned from his journey, he was more convinced than ever that the world was round. He shared his findings with anyone who would listen, but his words fell on deaf ears. People still thought he was crazy, and some even accused him of witchcraft. One day, Lorenzo was summoned before the king to explain his theory. He spoke eloquently and passionately, but the king was not convinced. He ordered Lorenzo to be imprisoned, saying that he was a danger to society. Lorenzo spent months in prison, trying to convince anyone who would listen that he was not crazy. But it was no use. The people had made up their minds, and they were convinced that he was a threat to their way of life. Finally, one night, a group of men stormed Lorenzo's cell. They dragged him out into the street and beat him mercilessly, accusing him of trying to destroy their world. He was left for dead, his body broken and bruised. As he lay there, dying, he thought of the love of his life, a woman named Isabella. They had been childhood sweethearts, but they had been torn apart by their different paths in life. He wished that he could see her one last time, to tell her how much he loved her. Just then, Isabella appeared, her eyes red with tears. She had heard about what had happened to Lorenzo, and she had rushed to be by his side. "Lorenzo," she cried, "I can't believe they did this to you." "I know," he said, struggling to speak through the pain. "But at least I had the chance to see you one last time." "I love you, Isabella." "I love you too, Lorenzo," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I always have."